There is a moment that almost everyone who has ever tried to simplify their life knows. You have read the book. You have watched the documentary. You have spent a weekend pulling things out of closets and filling bags for donation. You have felt, briefly, the clean relief of a room with less in it, the way a space opens up, when the objects in it have been reduced to only what you actually need. And then somewhere between 6 weeks and 6 months later, the room looks almost exactly as it did before. Not because you failed at the system, not because you lacked discipline or commitment, but because minimalism, as most people practice it, addresses the visible symptom of something it never quite names. It tells you what to remove. It does not tell you why the things keep coming back. This is the question that a Japanese concept answers, not by offering a different set of rules about owning less, but by offering a fundamentally different relationship to the objects, the time and the resources that pass through your life. The concept is Mottainai. In Japanese, Mottainai is an expression of regret, a feeling. Not a philosophy you study, but a response. You have the slight ache that arrives when something of value is wasted, when food is thrown away uneaten, when a coat is discarded because it went out of fashion, while still perfectly capable of keeping someone warm, when an afternoon passes in a way that leaves you feeling as if nothing of substance moved through you. The word is old. Its roots trace to Buddhist concepts of sacred essence. The idea that objects, like living things, carry something worth honoring. That to waste them is not merely inefficient, but a kind of moral failure. But Mottainai does not ask you to feel guilty. The feeling is closer to grief than to guilt. It is the sadness of something good that did not have to end, and did. And in Japan, that feeling is understood, as useful as information about your relationship with the world, rather than evidence of wrongdoing. The reason minimalism does not stick for most people is that it asks you to make decisions from a principle that remains abstract, until the moment of temptation. The principle is less is better. And when you are standing in front of an object when the coat is in your hands, and it still works and someone might need it, the principle does not give you a feeling, it gives you a calculation. And calculations in moments of friction lose to feelings almost every time. Mottainai works differently because it is already a feeling. It is not a rule about what you should own. It is a sensitivity to what things are, what they cost in terms of labor, materials, time and care, and a corresponding reluctance to treat them as disposable. This is why the Japanese repair things that other cultures throw away. Why food is stored, shared, and transformed rather than discarded. Why objects worn enough to bear marks of use are sometimes considered more beautiful than ones that just arrived from a store. The feeling of Mottainai is not taught as a lesson. It is absorbed as a cultural orientation, the sense that the world is not made of things, but of what things represent. There are 4 words that translate the spirit of Mottainai into a practical framework: reduce, reuse, recycle, respect. The first 3 appear on packaging and campaigns across dozens of countries. But respect, the 4th, changes the meaning of all 3. When you add respect, reducing is no longer subtraction. It is acknowledgement. To reduce is to say, I will not acquire this because I understand what acquiring it means. The resources it took to make, the space it will occupy, the problem of what happens when I no longer want it. When you add respect, reusing is no longer second best. The repaired item, the worn-in tool, the jacket that has been altered and kept these carry. Something a new object cannot, a history. The specific weight of having been used and chosen again. When you add respect, recycling becomes the last resort. The aim of Mottainai is never to reach that point, because the object will have been used fully, repaired when broken, passed on when no longer needed, before that moment arrives. And when respect is applied to time, which is where Mottainai becomes most quietly radical, an hour spent in distraction carries the same small grief as food left to rot, not because every hour must be productive, but because an hour is a resource, and a resource wasted is always worth noticing. What minimalism asks you to do is evaluate. Before you buy, assess whether you need it. Before you keep, decide if it serves you. Good questions, but they require seeing objects from the outside, as if you have no emotional relationship with them at all. This is exactly where most people stall, because they do have emotional relationships with their objects. And minimalism tends to treat this as a problem to be overcome, rather than information to be understood. Mottainai does not ask you to disentangle from your feelings about objects. It asks you to redirect them. The feeling shifts from "this thing is mine," and "I am reluctant to let go," to "this thing has value, and I want to make sure that value is not lost." These feel similar from the outside, but they produce different behaviors. The person reluctant to let go accumulates. The person unwilling to let value be lost gives objects away readily because an object no longer useful to you, but useful to someone else, is not being released. It is being honored. There is a practice in Japan called kintsugi, repairing broken ceramics with gold lacquer so that the fractures become visible rather than hidden. The bowl could have been discarded. It could have been repaired invisibly. Instead, it was repaired in a way that announces its history, that treats the breaking as part of the object's value rather than a diminishment of it. This is Mottainai applied to the object itself, not just keeping the bowl, but transforming the break into something it could not have been before it broke. Attention directed not toward hiding the waste, but toward converting it into something worth more. There is a version of Mottainai that extends beyond objects, into time, into difficult years. People talk about wasted time, but rarely in a way that produces anything other than regret. The Mottainai orientation asks, what can be made from this? Not in the sense of forced positivity, but in the sense of the craftsman who finds a piece of flawed wood and looks for the shape. The flaw makes possible, rather than discarding what was not expected. A difficult year can be wasted. It can also be the material of something, a recalibration, a clarity, a shift in what you want that could not have come from a comfortable year. Mottainai refuses to declare the difficulty worthless before seeing what can be made of it. What makes Mottainai different from minimalism, at its most fundamental level, is the direction of the question. Minimalism asks, is this serving me? The object? The commitment, does it add value to my life? And if not, can I let it go? Mottainai asks, am I serving this? Not in the sense of subjugating yourself to your possessions, but recognizing that things passing through your life carry something worth honoring and asking whether you are doing so. This reversal is subtle but significant. A minimalist might declutter and feel lighter, because what remained earned its place. A person oriented toward Mottainai might look at the same space and feel a different kind of attention, a responsibility to use things fully, to care for them well, to ensure that when they leave, having been genuinely used rather than merely owned. The outcome can look similar. Fewer things used with more intention, but the internal relationship is different. And the internal relationship is what determines whether the objects keep coming back. This is the reason minimalism does not stick. Not because people are weak or undisciplined, but because a principle without a corresponding feeling is a thought, and thoughts lose to feelings in the unguarded moments that matter. Mottainai is not a thought. It is a way of feeling the weight of what things are, and finding, in that weight, a natural reluctance to accumulate what you cannot honor, and a natural reluctance to discard what still has life in it. The objects in your space did not arrive by accident. Each one is the end point of a chain of labor, materials, and decision. To treat them casually is not a personal failing, but it is a disconnection from the people who made them, from the resources that composed them, from the care already invested before they arrived in your hands. To reconnect, to feel that disconnection as something real and worth mending, is the beginning of Mottainai. Begin where the waste is most visible, the food at the back of the refrigerator. You are hoping will disappear before you have to deal with it. The item bought in optimism and worn once. The gifts you keep out of obligation, but never use, while someone elsewhere might find them essential. You do not need a system for this. You need a feeling. The small, specific grief of this was worth something, and I am not treating it as if it were. That feeling, returned to again and again, is the beginning of a different relationship with the world. Not one of deprivation, not one of strict rules about what is permitted, but one in which the things around you are genuinely seen for what they cost, what they carry, and what they might still become. If this way of thinking resonated with you, consider following for more. There is something here every week. Something is only truly wasted when nothing can be made of it anymore.